So here we are in AX. I'm going to go to the procurement and sourcing parameters, which are found underneath procurement and sourcing, setup, procurement and sourcing parameters. In the General tab of the Procurement and Sourcing Parameters form, you'll notice the Activate Change Management checkbox. In my environment, this is disabled. It indicates that the default behavior is not for change management to be enabled. This is useful when not all vendors are going to use change management. If just a few vendors or some scenarios will use change management, it's best not to mark this checkbox and allow the override of settings per vendor. In this way, we can just enable change management on a handful of vendors. Let's go look at that now. I'll do this by opening up the vendor form underneath Procurement and Sourcing, Common, Vendors, and then All Vendors. If there's some specific vendors that I want to use the change management process with, I can select that vendor. I'm going to enable it for my Acme office supplies vendor here by clicking Edit, and then when the vendor detail form opens, I'll go down to the Purchase Order Defaults Fast tab, and in the lower right-hand side, you'll notice there's a checkbox here called Override Settings in the Change Management for Purchase Orders group. Once you override the settings, you can decide whether or not you want to activate change management for this vendor. There's also an additional checkbox here to allow override of the settings per purchase order. This is useful if not all purchase orders for a particular vendor will use change management. In scenarios where you want all purchase orders for this particular vendor to use change management, you should not select this checkbox. The last settings are directly on the purchase order. So we'll go to Procurement and Sourcing and create a new purchase order, and I'll show you those settings underneath Common and then All Purchase Orders. I'll click the new icon and create a new purchase order for the Acme office supply vendor that we just configured to use change management. Down on the General tab, move this up a little. Actually, it's on the Administration tab. You'll notice there's a checkbox called Activate Change Management. The checkbox is grayed out and disabled because I did not configure this vendor to allow override of the setting per vendor. We'll click OK to create the purchase order and add lines to the order just like normal. I'll verify the quantity and unit price. And when I'm done entering the details into the order, I can submit the order. You'll notice that if I go to the Purchase tab on the Action pane, all of the buttons in the Generate group for the confirmation are disabled. This is because you cannot confirm a purchase order that has change management enabled. You must first submit it to the workflow. So I'll click the Submit button. If I want to read the instructions, I can use the information icon next to the Submit button to read any instructions that have been entered into the workflow. I'll click Submit, and I can optionally type some notes in. When I click Submit, the workflow engine will pick up this request and process it according to the steps that are configured in the workflow. If we close this window and go back and refresh our purchase order list page, you'll see that our purchase order is in review. If I decided that I needed to make additional changes to this, I can use the Actions button to recall it, make additional changes, and then resubmit it to the workflow. If we go back to Procurement and Sourcing, there's another screen that can be used to review and edit purchase orders that are pending. There's one screen called Purchase Orders Not Sent, which will show you just purchase orders that have not been confirmed. There's another version towards the bottom called Not Submitted Purchase Orders, which are purchase orders that have been created but not yet submitted to the workflow. and then the pending purchase orders screen. This will filter the list of purchase orders to just the purchase orders that have an approval status of in review. You can perform actions and edit records in this screen just as you can in any of the other purchase order forms. Now let's take a look at some other purchase order tasks that you can perform.